Shalom and welcome to another edition of Parsha Talk. I'm Rabbi Elliot Malamet in Highland Park, New Jersey, at the Highland Park Conservative Temple Congregation, Anshe Emet. And joining my good friends, Rabbi Barry Chesler, Solomon Schechter Day School of Long Island, Rabbi Jeremy Kolmanovsky, Anshe Chesed, New York City. We're recording this on day 444, praying for the hostages. We hope every day that goes by is one day closer for their release. We have no idea what what is in store in the days ahead, the weeks ahead. Of course, we have our hope, and we're not going to lose hope, and we're not going to forget them, and we're not going to put them aside. We gravitate to the study of the Torah, both to understand our world and to find comfort in these very, very difficult days. Notwithstanding the fact that we have this feeling that things are changing and things are moving. We hope they move in the right direction with that. So we are thinking about them, obviously, and praying for their release on this day 444 with this week's Parsha, Parasha Miketz, which we're also going to commemorate Hanukkah. Hanukkah starts this week. So happy Hanukkah as we begin. Miketz, we're in the now second Parsha of the story of Joseph. Joseph, when we last joined this story, Joseph ended up in jail with the baker and the chief wine steward of Pharaoh. He successfully interprets the dreams, but the wine steward forgets him. V'lo zachar sar mashkim et Yosef ha'ishkacheu. He forgets him. That painful, you know, coda to the story, being forgotten. There's nothing worse than being forgotten. And we have 2 years that go by, 2 years of Joseph being incarcerated, Joseph in jail, Joseph's hostage status. And it goes 2 years. Here we are, 444, and this would have been what, 730. After 2 years, Pharaoh has these extraordinary dreams, and it's at that point that the butler, the wine steward, basically says, to Pharaoh, I remember this Hebrew in jail with me. They hauled Joseph up and they bring him to Pharaoh. They wash him down, they shave him down, they put on new clothes for him. And Pharaoh begins to tell the dreams, and they're extraordinary. I want to just focus on one thing that is maybe the hook for me, at least, as we begin to read. So Joseph says, on more than one occasion, he says it's the interpretation of dreams belongs to God. Okay, I'm going to look for the exact verse here. Um, so back to we had it. He says, Pharaoh says to Joseph, I dreamt a dream. There's nobody to interpret it. I heard about you. I heard that you know how to do a dream. Vayan Yosef et Paro. Joseph answers Pharaoh, Biladai. No, not me. Elohim Yaneh et Shlom Paro. That's such a powerful verse. Elohim Yaneh et Shlom Paro. So he's pointing to God. He's saying, God will answer to your well-being, and we as the readers, the listeners, understand, well, Joseph, you're the conduit. How else is Pharaoh going to understand what God wants if you do not think of yourself as someone who is going to be the instrument to relay that? The word prophet doesn't exist yet in the lexicon, but Joseph, what does he understand of himself at this point? And what's going through his mind, I guess. Is he looking at this as his ticket out? Is he looking at this as his opportunity? Or is he looking at this to do a service? Is he, w-
Fee for service.
deeper service? What's going on?
So I think what's important to know, we actually have had the word Navi already. Abraham was described as a Navi several chapters ago.
Okay.
Um, but I think what's interesting here is as everyone knows, there are three sets of dreams. There are the two that Joseph has at the beginning of Vayeshev, the two that the butler and the baker have at the end of Vayeshev, and the two that Pharaoh have.
Right.
Only in the last two cases does Joseph attribute the interpretation to God.
No, no, no. In the last
Eh,
two cases, both in the
The
Butler.
last two cases, both
Yeah.
with the butler and the baker,
Yeah.
and with Paro. And what's important is that that's why those dream interpretations lead to redemption
Interesting.
for the butler and for the Egyptians. And in fact, were invited to consider the entire Middle East. But in the first set of dreams, there is no mention of God, that the dreams come from God, and there is no redemption because he ends up being thrown into a pit and then sold to the Ishmaelites.
Well, I
But,
would
but,
say
but,
I don't it's all a matter of the the framework. That is to say, at what level of what's the pitch at which it's happening. Those dreams, in fact, are going to come true, and they are going to be instrumental in the story of redemption. The brothers coming down and bowing down to him, and the sun and moon. Okay, and as the Gemara will say, dreams are never exact, right? Because Rachel's already dead, so quote unquote the moon cannot bow
And
down.
also the son, because I don't
I
believe Jacob
disagree. I
actually
think
bows
Jacob, I
down to
think Rachel's
Joseph.
still alive. I think it's out of order, but we'll save
In
it for
any event,
another.
well, that
But
the Gemara offers
Yeah.
that the dream cannot be true because
Okay.
Rachel's already dead.
right,
So
but what
there's
I'm talking, Jeremy, is that the actual interpretation of the dream does not lead to redemption. Events will point that out, as you correctly note, but after the butler and baker, the butler leaves prison 3 days later.
No, but I think, I mean, Jacob understands dreams to be prophetic. And so, Ve'aviv Shamaret Davar, when Joseph has the first two dreams, what stays with him is, he said he dreamt these things, these dreams. He's 17 years old. He may not understand what these dreams are, but I understand that something's going on here. I'm going to remember them. I'm going to
Right,
keep.
but again, when they bring the Ketone Pasim to Jacob, he doesn't say, well, it's okay because we have this dream. He's inconsolable.
It's a catastrophe for him because the this is a catastrophe of faith also. The dreams have to
Yes.
are ruined, okay, are destroyed. All right, so let me ask you then, what has happened between in Joseph's mind now with the dream of the butler and the baker? He says, "Halol Elohim Pitronim." Interpretation is from God. So he he's in jail when he says that. He's been in jail for I don't know how long when he says that. So something must have clicked for him.
I think that he has a sense of humility.
Yeah.
That, again, not to harp on the first two dreams, they are portrayed, I think, as in an arrogant way. Not only have I had these dreams, but I'm going to tell you what they mean. Right? In the other two cases, he's interpreting dreams for other people.
So what is the change?
And even though he's the one interpreting them, he's telling them that the interpretation comes from God. It's not him.
So let me ask you this question, okay? Does the humiliation that Joseph, now comes to term with, or that is it because of jail, or is it because of the incident? I mean, he ends up in jail because of the incident with Potiphar's wife, but the incident with Potiphar's wife is humiliating of the highest order, okay? Because, in the scene itself, the way the Torah describes it, he runs out, I guess he's naked. He has no clothes on, okay?
at least shirtless,
He is shirtless.
at least shirtless,
And shiftless.
and
Okay.
shirtless.
So he has been charged with attempted, I don't know if it's an attempted rape charge, but
Well, but we also have to understand that I think Potiphar himself understands it's a false charge because he should have been put to death.
okay.
Right? You don't imprison the person for attempting to rape your wife in that situation. You just execute him.
This, by the way, there are consistent parallels between this and the story of Esther. So
Yeah.
when King Ahasuerus thinks that Haman is trying to rape Queen Esther, he doesn't get prison.
Right. He gets executed. Okay,
I
so
think that
so
I think Potiphar knows his wife,
Potiphar
and
knows his wife. He doesn't execute Joseph, but Joseph is humiliated on several levels, including the
I,
sexual level,
I'm a
including
little, yeah. Go ahead.
including being in jail altogether,
Okay, being
including
in jail stinks, but I'm slightly less inclined to see Joseph's greatness here in humility, because Joseph's greatness in every single story is I am Ish Matzliach. I am Midas. Everything I touch turns to gold. It turns to gold after suffering. It's not that it works the first time every time, but ultimately, he gets. It, we talked about this last week. Was Yesha was your bar mitzvah portion, was also my daughter Dasi's, and she gave it to our daughter back 15 years ago, based on a children's book called Fortunately. Everything that happened is fortunately this happened, but unfortunately it was a bad consequence. But fortunately, something else good happened. Unfortunately, there was another bad consequence, but fortunately, there was yet another good consequence. And that's Joseph's story. Unfortunately, he gets sent to prison. Fortunately, he interprets the dreams. Unfortunately, he gets forgotten, but fortunately, he's ultimately remembered. But then when he gets remembered, and this part is to me the interesting element, which is making me resist humility a little bit as an explanation. When Pharaoh gets the dream that Joseph correctly interprets as a divine message of a coming famine, he says he says to Pharaoh, "Okay, here's what you need to do. Ve'ata yireh Pharaoh ish navon v'chacham v'yishitehu al eretz Mitzrayim. What you need is a really smart guy. I happen to have one right before you,
yeah.
and you should place him as chief of all the land of Egypt, and you should make certain pikudim, you should make or pikidim rather, you should make certain overseers. And here's what we're going to do: we're going to divide the land into 20%, and there's going to be this and that and the other thing, and we're going to gather up all the profit, all the produce. And Joseph really is smarter than everybody else. He really is more charismatic and more talented than everybody else. And so while there's some chastenedness that he learns over time and will ultimately help him reconcile with the brothers, he really is the smartest guy in the
All
Okay,
right.
room.
but
So
I
And
want to
you,
suggest a
all right,
slightly
and then you
different
I have a question.
interpretation of this.
Okay, go
Is
ahead.
that it's when Joseph is described as an Ish Matzliach, a successful man, he takes credit for the success. But what happens now is he becomes, even though it's unstated, an Ish Elohim because he understands that the success comes from God, and that's where the humility is. I don't think he's quite the same person in the scene, even though, as you say, he is the smartest guy in the room. Um, I don't think that he sees himself quite like that, even though it's true.
I if I would argue for this down the line, and I don't have to die on this particular hill, but the treatment of the brothers, the yanking of their chains, the manipulation that he will engage in when his starving brothers come for help, um, seems to me to reflect that he still is he's still the he's his father's son in some respects. As Jacob as Jacob was always trying to get ahead, as Judah, when they sold him into slavery in Egypt, Judah sold Joseph into slavery. He says, "How are we going to make a buck on this?" I still see those kinds of reactions in Joseph's character.
Okay, so here's my paper, the essay that I would assign to a first year Bible study literature course would be compare the character development of Joseph to the character development of Judah. And if you're arguing, and if I'm proposing the argument that Joseph has some humiliation, certainly by ending up in jail, and has to, internalize his humiliation to know that he speaks in the name of God now, that God speaks through him, and then compare that to Judah, who last week had a different kind of humiliation at the hands of Tamar, his daughter-in-law, and moves through the story in I would almost say becomes quite heroic in the story. I mean, we're not going to spoil it for our listeners and viewers to reveal that Judah plays a rather pivotal role in the way that the story, finds its denouement, which is that Judah puts everything on the line, and that Judah has really learned something from the whole experience. So in a way, there are two trajectories of character development. Joseph becomes, chastened by the experience. However, look, from the very beginning in this parsha, when the brothers come down to, he's mean. I could use other words, but he's really bad
Right, but I
to
think
them.
that that's his function. So what I would suggest though
No, I
is
don't.
that
I'm sorry if I to interrupt. I think he's deliberately being mean. He doesn't have to be. One of the puzzles that for the story is, why does he have like not care? Why does he have to be this way? And then
because I think that if we want to move the brothers to a similar point that they were when Joseph was in the pit, there has to be some degree of meanness. And he can't be nice and get the same reaction.
he could be. So I want him. I,
So
there's,
wait, Barry, go back and just develop that one a little bit,
go
which
ahead.
we talked about this before we started recording. The development that the brothers have to go through to make this work out right. This is a
Right. Well,
key.
you had pointed out that the definition of Baal Tshuva Gamur, the complete Baal Tshuva, is the penitent, is the one who is in the same situation as he was before and makes a different decision. And so they have to be led into a situation where they have to choose between abandoning a brother or doing something else. And you can't make nice and have that scene come up again. You have to orchestrate it negatively. But I want to add something else to our discussion here because one of the things that we don't sometimes address is that the people in Breshit operate on different levels. There's the individual human drama. We have a drama, a man and his 12 sons, but there's also the tribal drama and later the national drama. And Joseph and Judah, of course, represent the southern kingdom and the northern kingdom of Israel and Judah. And we know historically when we get to Kings that Judah is going to be triumphant, not Joseph through Ephraim. And that's part of this as well. But at the very end, spoiler alert for those of you who are behind in your Torah reading, when Joseph has to placate his brothers, he says, don't worry, this was all done by God. You were instruments in what happened to me, but God was pulling the strings. And that, I think, is the ultimate act of humility because once his father is dead, he can do whatever he wants. We
He
saw
does
that in The Godfather.
he does the greatest movie ever. He this is quite correct that in the end the story does come to a deep reconciliation and a deep humility. But and I agree also with what Elliot said before is that or what you said, we all said that the cruelty and the manipulative quality, which is gross, which is obnoxious, um, is in service of an important plot device, which is that any Israelite, any Jew reading the story through the centuries has known about exile, has known about alienation, and has known about the divided kingdoms. And so it's not like we can, as the Yiddish expression goes, you can't ask a kashya oifa maisa. You can't pose a, a plot objection to the story as it happened. The story as it happened for Am Yisrael, for the Jewish people, has been exile, has been slavery, has been suffering, has been alienation. And this story did not start at point one in history and said, like what would be the best possible history? It speaks to a people who's experienced all of these divisions, all of this suffering, all of this exile, and is trying to tell us a story that helps us get through the problems of alienation through reconciliation, or helps us get through the problems of famine, through divine providence and stuff like that. And so Joseph is a great instrument for all of his flaws as a human being. And I wouldn't want to be his brother. He was probably a jerk to be a brother. Um, but he is an instrument of providence to help us all through those hard spots.
So my question really in the assignment is, when Joseph confronts himself and identity, and the brothers coming down to Egypt is really part of that plot in his life. He's got to figure out, he has to understand who he is. But Judah also has to understand who he is as well. Because Judah is the one that he triggered the sale. He triggered the idea of sending him down to Egypt. The responsibility for what happened to Joseph truly rests with him as the leading figure among the brothers. So Joseph has to come to terms with his identity, trying to run away from who he is, and Judah, I think, has to come to terms with his identity as being responsible. Which is the greater leap? Can you even compare these two arcs? I have a sin. I'm responsible, okay, and I have to own up to that. That's very hard. Um,
So,
yeah,
well, I have to say that Judah has the greater arc
the harder
because
lift.
we're Jews, not Joseph's.
We're Joe, yeah.
And the point is that Judah always is operating within the Hebraic Israelite tradition. Joseph is half Egyptian.
Well, okay, so just hold it but Jerry, I know you mentioned that you spoke about this last Shabbos about Judah, the story, and you said, the story doesn't really fit. What did you say, Tuck?
That was June
What
and
did you
tomorrow.
say?
Well, in Parsha Vayeshev, and it's our readers all know this, but our listeners all know this, but the Torah isn't divided into parshiot.
Yeah.
The accidents of history divides something to be Vayeshev and something else to be Miketz and something else to be Vayigash. Um, so we want to talk about more than just 1 week's reading at a given. But Genesis 38, in Genesis 37, Joseph is thrown in the pit and sold to Egypt. In Genesis 38, Judah has his own marital life. His wife dies. He has three sons. Two of them die, and one of them has a daughter-in-law who needs that ameliorative process of quote unquote brother-in-law marriage to give her an heir. A childless widow needs an heir from her brother-in-law. Kind of gross to modern ears, but the
So when
thought
heir
is
dies,
To
Onan has to
propagate the
marry
name
her
of his,
to
to
you
produce
have
propagate the name
another
of
heir.
the
That's
deceased
very
brother.
good.
another heir. One heir yields another heir. It is both for the woman and for the memory of the dead person that they have to have a symbolic child whose biological parentage is the brother or close family member of, in halakha, in actual halakha as it emerges, the actual biological brother. But this story seems to reflect an earlier background. Judah doesn't he has two sons who die associated with this woman. He won't give the third son. He leaves her to languish with no means of support. Um, and she tricks him into sleeping with her and becoming pregnant by him. And the point is that when it appears that Tamar, first of all, there's another great element in the story, which is that she acts as if she is a sex working prostitute who needs to be paid to have sex. Uh, And Judah says, "Well, I'll send you a goat." And she says, "Well, in the meantime, what can I have?" And the goat does not appear to be super expensive. We all of us who observe Passover know what a goat costs.
To
Right.
Zuzim.
So not a whole lot of money. But in that story in Genesis 38, which is really literally speaking, Genesis 37, 39, and 40 are the Joseph story. 38 is an interposition. But the story is really important for the Judah narrative for the reasons that we're talking about now, because he is going to have to deal with his own wrongdoing. So in the story, Judah uh, agrees to sleep with her for a very small fee, but he's going to send the fee. And in the meantime, what does she want? She wants his identity marker. She essentially wants his passport, his identity card, and his shevet, his staff. Lo Yasur Shevet me Yehuda, Genesis will later say, Jacob will say, the staff of leadership will never depart from Judah. This is a major emphasis of Judah's royal quality, and the Davidic line will come through him. Um, and when it seems like, she has been adulterous and she's pregnant and she's gonna Judah says, well, we're gonna burn her. And then she says, well, I'm pregnant by the person whose staff and seal this is. And Judah says, Tzadka mimeni. Judah says, which either means she is more righteous than I, Tzadka mimeni, or Tzadka, she's right, mimeni. Her pregnancy is from me. I'm the father. And he takes responsibility for this massively embarrassing, massively, the easiest thing in the world is the powerful man to let the powerless woman be punished for a crime to save his own face, but he doesn't do that. And that is the element in Genesis 38, which lets us know, which kind of clues us in to the reality that he is going to take responsibility, even though he blew it in 37, he's going to take responsibility by the time the story reaches its denouement.
So in your distillation here, would you say that Judah makes the bigger leap of character by owning up to things? Joseph makes a leap, but he still has a lot to go through before he comes to, the fully developed Joseph, which is,
So, right. The way I would cast it is this, is that with Judah, redemption comes from transformation. He is a changed person. With Joseph, it comes perhaps more from reconciliation. And I
just
think that Jewish history, historically, we as Jews aspire to transformation as the gate to redemption rather than, say, reconciliation, right? Yom Kippur is about transforming ourselves. Even though it leads to reconciliation with God, we hope, it begins with an act of self-transformation.
I love that.
yeah.
And the reconciliation part among brothers, because in the end, as you alluded to, we said this before, the Parshiot are somewhat arbitrary. The whole Joseph narrative, after Jacob is dead, the brothers say, Dad told us, Dad told you not to kill us. And Joseph says, guys, I wasn't going to kill you. Um, this is, the divine providential hand was working through this. I really never intended to kill you. And I love what you said, Barry, about the optimal, lechatchila, the ideal thing is that we transform ourselves into the best version of ourselves. And you know what? I like the reconciliation part too, which is that
Well, so
even when I completely still hate you, I can put that aside and live with you as brothers.
I'm wondering if it's an either or, proposition as opposed to both and here, what you've challenged me to think about, Barry, is that I have a preconception of Breshit, Genesis, as being is trying to work these problems out. Breshit is all about siblings and their dysfunction and their tortured relationships, and it's not until the end of Breshit where the brothers come together that we're able to put that behind us. And then we have models moving from Shemot on where brothers and sisters seem to get along. Aaron and Moshe seem to get along. They share in the leadership of
V'ra'acha
Miriam as well.
v'samach v'ra'acha v'samach libo. That's the best line. Aaron,
Exactly.
Moshe's going to go. Moshe's going to meet Aaron, and Moshe is the younger brother, and the younger brother, who's the star of the show from here on in, and is clearly Aaron's got a good job, but Moshe has a much better job. God says, Aaron's going to come in and meet you, and he's going to see you, and he's going to be glad. That's just like such a great counteraction to the various kinds of, often murderous or near murderous brotherly conflicts here in
Well,
Genesis.
so let me ask you this. Maybe reconciliation requires transformation, and maybe transformation requires reconciliation.
Yeah, I think what you said is absolutely correct. At
Yeah.
the beginning, we tend to see it as either or. But like a lot of things in life, both and is more inclusive and ultimately, I would think, more conclusive as well.
Nice.
Nice. Well, it is a good place to kind of draw the coda here. Except so where are we in this story then? We're going to read through Miketz and end up at this precipice. It's always like, we can't wait to the next week because we have this cliffhanger. Joseph keeps Benjamin as a hostage, basically. And
Joseph had kept this. This is part of the power of the story. Like as Barry said, that the point is the brothers are called upon to be in the same situation and behave differently. So the first time they come down, Joseph says, "Okay, I'm going to give you the food, but I don't trust you. You got to bring back your younger brother. In the meantime, I'm going to hold Shimon hostage." And they say, "Okay," and they go back up to Canaan, and they leave Shimon, as far as they know, in jail, and they stay in Canaan until the food runs out. Which presumably they didn't take a week's worth of food back to Canaan. They presumably took like a year's worth of food back to Canaan. So Shimon, they left his sorry carcass in jail, and then when they're going to arrest Binyamin, that's the cliffhanger of this week. He says, "Okay, that's it. Binyamin is going to be my slave. You all go back to Canaan." And then Judah says, dot, 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 and we'll see you in Parshat Vayigash.
yeah. So this is look, we are seeing the emergence of character here, that the stage that was set already back in Vayeshev, the transformation that Judah uh, experienced at the hands of his daughter-in-law, I think really prepared him psychologically, spiritually, morally for the transformation that has to happen. One transformation is through, personal, intimate sexual relations, and the other is, through uh, a fraternal relationship, and also a relationship that has, the higher value of life itself. He's responsible for the symbolic death of Joseph, and that is a much higher burden for him to bear, a much heavier burden for him to bear. I think these are really important things, important ideas that we unearthed here, or discovered, or revealed through the help of God.
Hello, Elohim Pitronim.
Our sponsor.
No, it's amazing to me, is the story never exhausts itself from interpretation. And look, the process of studying it together is this is where we share the experience. It's a
Lo
divine
Alman
experience.
Yisrael. The Jewish people are never forlorn. We always have the Torah to keep us going.
Amen, amen. All right, with
Amen.
that, we want to wish everyone a happy Hanukkah. Hope you
Happy
enjoy
Hanukkah.
Happy
first
Light the
part
Hanukkah,
lights.
of
Chag Uri
Hanukkah.
Sameach, Shabbat
Bring
Shalom.
bring light into the world, bring redemption wherever you can, bring light in the world of darkness. Shabbat Shalom, and we'll see you in the next edition of Parsha Talk. Shabbat Shalom, Chag Sameach. Bye-bye.